the story of a slave who rose to the top and became pharaoh. The desert wind howled over the golden dunes of ancient Egypt, carrying with it whispers of kingdoms, gods, and destinies yet to unfold. Beneath the blazing sun, a young boy named Ammonius stumbled across the hot sand, his ankles bound by rope, his wrists sore from chains. He was no prince, no warrior, only a slave bought for a handful of copper coins. Ammonius had been taken from a small village near the Nile Delta, where his family once farmed the riverbanks. Raiders had come one night, men wearing jackal masks and carrying torches. They burned homes, seized children, and vanished into the dark. When Ammonius awoke, he was on a boat bound for Thebes, the great city of pharaohs. For years, Ammonius toiled in silence within the vast palace of Pharaoh Seti, a ruler feared and worshipped alike. The boy's duties were simple yet cruel: cleaning the stone floors, carrying water, polishing statues of gods he was forbidden to pray to. His hands were blistered, his back scarred, but his spirit refused to break. Each night, when other slaves slept, he would sit by the small oil lamp and study the carvings on the temple walls, hieroglyphs that told stories of gods, stars, and men who shaped history. Ammonius was fascinated by knowledge. He believed that words held power greater than swords. One day, as he swept near the royal scribes, he paused to watch them write. The scribe master, an old man named Menfer, noticed his gaze. "You like symbols, boy?" he asked. Ammonius hesitated, afraid to speak. "Yes, master," he whispered. Menfer smirked. "Slaves have no need for knowledge. Knowledge is for the free." But that night, as fate would have it, Menfer found one of his papyrus rolls missing. Days later, he discovered Ammonius behind the granary, copying letters into the sand with a stick. Instead of punishing him, the old scribe stared for a long moment, then chuckled softly. "You're either a fool or a genius," he said. "Come before dawn tomorrow. If anyone asks, you're cleaning the floors." That was how Ammonius' secret education began. Every morning before the sun touched the pyramids, he met Menfer in the shadowed halls of the temple library. There he learned to read, write, and count. He studied astronomy, agriculture, and even medicine. The more he learned, the more his mind soared beyond the palace walls. He no longer saw himself as a slave, but as something more, a man destined to rise above chains. Years passed, and Ammonius grew into a strong young man. His sharp mind caught the attention of others, even nobles who never noticed slaves before. When an epidemic struck the servants' quarters, Ammonius used the herbs and poultices he'd learned about to heal dozens. Word of his skills spread until one day, Princess Nephra, daughter of Pharaoh Seti, summoned him. The princess was known for her beauty, but also her cold heart. She sat upon a throne of alabaster, her eyes sharp like obsidian. "You are the slave who heals," she said. "Is that true?" "I try to help my lady," Ammonius replied humbly. Nephra's handmaiden was gravely ill, and none of the royal physicians could cure her. Ammonius was brought to the royal chamber, where he mixed herbs and recited quiet prayers to the gods. Within days, the girl began to recover. Pharaoh himself heard of it. "Bring the slave before me," Pharaoh commanded. Ammonius stood before the throne, trembling. The hall was filled with gold, incense, and the sound of chanting priests. Pharaoh Seti's gaze was like that of a lion, piercing and heavy. "They say you defied death," Pharaoh said. "You saved a life that even my healers could not." "I only used what the earth provides, my lord," Ammonius answered softly. Pharaoh leaned forward. "What is your name?" "Ammonius." "A slave with the name of a god," the pharaoh said, amused. "Tell me, Ammonius, what do you desire?" The hall went silent. Every noble watched him, expecting him to beg for gold, freedom, or favor. But Ammonius raised his head and said, "I wish to serve Egypt with my knowledge." Pharaoh's laughter echoed through the hall. "A slave who wishes to serve Egypt? Very well, Ammonius. From this day forth, you shall no longer carry water. You will study under my scholars. Let us see if your mind is truly a gift of the gods, or a trick of fate." And so, the boy who once swept palace floors began his journey among Egypt's learned men. But beyond the shining halls, jealousy stirred. Nobles whispered of a slave rising too high. Priests questioned whether the gods approved. And somewhere deep in his heart, Ammonius knew that knowledge alone would not protect him from the storm that was coming. He had escaped the chains of labor, yet new chains of envy and power awaited him. The desert winds had brought him to the palace, but destiny was far from done with him. The years rolled forward like the great river Nile, steady, unstoppable, and filled with hidden depths. Under Pharaoh Seti's favor, Ammonius rose from being a mere servant to a student among the royal scholars. The halls that once echoed with the whip's crack now echoed with his footsteps and the turning of scrolls. Ammonius studied everything the priests and scholars knew: geometry, star maps, medicine, and the art of leadership. His teachers were men who had served pharaohs for decades, yet even they began to whisper in awe of the young man's brilliance. His eyes held questions that few dared to ask, and his tongue spoke with the calm of a man who understood both poverty and power. But not everyone welcomed him. One man in particular despised him, Vizier Rekhmire, Pharaoh's most trusted advisor and a man whose pride matched his influence. Rekhmire had ruled the royal council for years, guiding Pharaoh's decrees and controlling access to power. To him, Ammonius was an intruder, an insect who had crawled too close to the sun. Pharaoh's kindness has made him blind, Rekhmire hissed one night to the high priest. A slave with a scholar's tongue is still a slave. He must be reminded of that. Despite the growing whispers, Ammonius continued his studies. At night, he still visited Menfer, the old scribe who had once risked everything to teach him. Menfer was now frail, his hair as white as temple stone. "Knowledge will raise you, my son," Menfer told him one evening. "But remember, power without mercy turns men into the very monsters they once feared." Ammonius nodded, holding those words close to his heart. Soon, Egypt faced a terrible drought. The Nile failed to flood, crops withered, and hunger spread across the land. The people murmured that the gods were angry. Pharaoh Seti called for his priests and astrologers, demanding answers, but none could explain the reason for the drought. It was then Ammonius stepped forward. "My lord," he said, bowing low before Pharaoh, "the flood follows the moon and the rains from the south. If we open channels and store the water from the last flood, we can save our crops before the next season." Rekhmire sneered. "You speak of commanding the river itself. Do you think yourself wiser than the gods?" "I only speak of what the gods have already given us," Ammonius replied calmly. Pharaoh leaned forward. "Then you will oversee this task, Ammonius. If you fail, the gods will decide your fate." And so Ammonius was given his first great challenge. He led hundreds of workers to dig canals, build dams, and redirect what little water remained from the shrunken Nile. He worked beside them in the heat, sweating as they did, earning their respect. For the first time, the slaves and commoners saw one of their own command free men. Months passed, and when the next flood season came, Egypt was ready. The waters filled the channels Ammonius had designed, saving the crops and feeding thousands. The people praised Pharaoh, but they whispered another name as well: Ammonius. He became known as the slave who spoke to the river. Pharaoh Seti was impressed beyond measure. During a great festival, he called Ammonius before all of Egypt. "You have done what even priests could not," the pharaoh declared. "From this day, you shall serve as my royal steward, the keeper of Egypt's granaries and master of the river's works." The crowd erupted in cheers. Gold bracelets were placed upon Ammonius' wrists, where chains had once been. But in the shadows of the hall, Vizier Rekhmire's eyes burned with envy. He bowed before Pharaoh but whispered to himself, "A serpent has entered the court, and I shall be the one to crush it." That night, as torches flickered in the palace corridors, Rekhmire summoned his spies. "Watch the slave," he ordered. "Find his weakness. No man rises this high without a secret dragging him down." Ammonius knew nothing of the plots forming around him. To him, the world finally felt open, full of promise. The princess, Nephra, often came to him seeking counsel on matters of trade and the welfare of the poor. Their conversations stretched into long hours, filled with laughter and quiet understanding. She saw in him something rare, a man who listened. One evening, as they stood on the palace terrace overlooking the Nile, Nephra said softly, "Do you ever miss your home, Ammonius?" He looked toward the horizon, where the river met the desert. "Every day," he said. "But I have learned that home is not always where you are born. Sometimes it is the place where you are allowed to dream." Nephra's gaze lingered on him longer than propriety allowed. The princess of Egypt had begun to feel something she could not name. Yet love between a royal and a man born a slave was a dangerous fire, one that could consume them both if it ever burned too brightly. As the moon rose over Thebes, Ammonius felt the first true warmth of his life. But in the darkness behind the golden walls, envy and hatred began to take root. The higher he rose, the more dangerous his fall would become. The palace of Thebes shone like a crown beneath the sun, but even the brightest gold hides shadows. As Ammonius' reputation grew, so did the envy in the hearts of those who feared him. In the royal court, whispers began to twist his name. Some called him wise, others called him dangerous. Pharaoh Seti, proud and aging, trusted Ammonius deeply now. The two spent long hours discussing matters of state, the harvest, the building of temples, and the future of Egypt. Seti saw in Ammonius the spirit of renewal, a man unburdened by the greed that often haunted nobles. But Vizier Rekhmire saw only a threat. For weeks, Rekhmire's spies followed Ammonius. They listened at doorways, searched his quarters, and questioned those who had once known him as a slave. Finally, they brought the vizier a discovery. Ammonius' old friend and secret teacher, Menfer, still lived in the poor district near the temple grounds. Rekhmire smiled like a serpent finding prey. "A secret past," he murmured. "Every man who rises too high forgets where his chains once lay. Let us remind him." That night, Rekhmire ordered Menfer's arrest on false charges of theft from the royal storehouses. The old man was dragged before the council, trembling and weak. Ammonius, shocked and furious, rushed to defend him. "My lord Pharaoh," Ammonius pleaded, "this man is innocent. He taught me to read and serve Egypt better. He gave me wisdom, not crime." Rekhmire bowed deeply and said with false sorrow, "My Pharaoh, it seems our royal steward has long concealed that he was trained in secret by the scribe, without temple authority. Is it not dangerous that a slave, educated outside the law, holds such power now?" The court murmured. Pharaoh looked troubled. The priests frowned. Menfer's old eyes met Ammonius, filled with peace and pride. "Do not speak further," he whispered to Ammonius. "Your path is beyond mine now." Before Pharaoh could decide, Menfer took the blame himself. "I confess," he said. "I taught him. Punish me if you must. But know this, he will bring light to Egypt." Pharaoh sighed heavily. "You have broken sacred rule, Menfer. Yet your years of service cannot be forgotten. You shall not die, but you are banished from Thebes. May the gods forgive you." Ammonius' heart broke as his old mentor was led away in chains. Rekhmire smiled quietly, satisfied that he had struck his first blow. Days turned to weeks, but Ammonius did not yield. He buried his grief in work, overseeing irrigation, building granaries, helping farmers recover from the drought. The people loved him more than ever. They called him the servant of the Nile, and songs began to spread about the slave who saved Egypt. Pharaoh Seti, seeing this love, grew even fonder of Ammonius. One evening, he said, "Ammonius, I have watched you rise with honor. You remind me of my youth, before the crown weighed upon me. Tell me truthfully, do you seek power?" Ammonius bowed low. "I seek only to serve Egypt, my lord. To see no man starve, and no child suffer under the sun." Pharaoh nodded slowly. "Then you are already greater than those who chase thrones. Stay true to your heart, Ammonius." But fate does not let greatness grow without trial. One evening, a messenger arrived from the borders, Rebellion had broken out in the southern provinces. Pharaoh's armies were stretched thin, and the crops from that region supplied much of Egypt. Rekhmire stepped forward in the council. "My pharaoh, let me lead the army to crush this rebellion." But Pharaoh turned to Ammonius. "You have won the hearts of men through wisdom, not the sword. Perhaps it is time to see if that wisdom can end bloodshed before it begins. Ammonius, will you go?" The court gasped. A slave leading an army? It was unheard of. "I will go," Ammonius said quietly. Within days, Ammonius led a caravan southward, soldiers, scribes, and envoys. When he reached the rebellious province, he did not draw his sword. Instead, he gathered the local chieftains under the shade of palm trees and listened. He learned their grievances. The taxes had been doubled by corrupt overseers loyal to Rekhmire. The people were starving while grain was hoarded for tribute. Ammonius sent word back to Pharaoh, exposing the corruption. Then he promised the chieftains fair trade and equal harvest shares if they laid down their arms. Moved by his honesty, they agreed. Without a single battle, peace returned. When Ammonius came back to Thebes, he brought not war trophies, but wagons of grain and gifts from grateful farmers. Pharaoh received him with open arms before all the court. "You have done what generals could not," Seti declared. "You have conquered hearts with truth. Egypt owes you much." But while the crowd cheered, Rekhmire's rage burned hotter than the desert sun. He could not strike Ammonius openly now, the people would revolt. So he whispered poison instead. That night, he went to Princess Nephra's chambers. "My lady," he said slyly, "the people chant Ammonius' name as if he were already pharaoh. Have you not noticed how often your father favors him? Perhaps soon there will be no place for your own blood on the throne." Nephra's face turned pale. "You lie, vizier. My father trusts him, nothing more." Rekhmire bowed low. "Of course, my princess. Forgive me. I only warn you of the winds of ambition that blow too fiercely in this palace." When he left, his words lingered like a thorn in her heart. She began to doubt what had once felt so pure. Ammonius, unaware of the growing storm, stood by the Nile that night, staring at the stars reflected in its waters. He felt the pull of destiny growing stronger, like the tide beneath the moon. He had risen higher than he ever dreamed, but now he could sense that the next step would either raise him to the throne or cast him into the abyss. The sun rose over Thebes like a molten coin, painting the palace in fire and gold. Ammonius stood at the balcony of his chamber, watching the city come alive, the markets opening, priests chanting to Ra, and the river glimmering like a path of liquid light. Yet within that beauty, a shadow grew that he could not yet name. Pharaoh Seti had grown older. His once mighty voice had become softer, and his steps slower. He still ruled with wisdom, but illness had begun to steal his strength. Often now, he summoned Ammonius to his private garden to talk, not of war or work, but of the past. "My father told me," Seti said one morning, his breath labored, "that a king must rule not with fear, but with the memory of what it means to be human. You have that memory, Ammonius. You have walked among the hungry and the broken. Perhaps the gods sent you here to remind me of that." Ammonius bowed deeply. "My lord, you have been Egypt's light. I only carry a torch that you lit." Seti smiled weakly. "Perhaps so. But every flame must pass to another hand, someday." Those words echoed in Ammonius' heart long after the pharaoh had retired. He did not yet understand their weight, but Rekhmire did. The vizier had been watching closely. He saw the pharaoh's fading strength and Ammonius' rising influence. He knew that if Seti named Ammonius as his successor, or even protector of the throne, his own power would be broken forever. So Rekhmire began his final plan. He bribed the royal guards, whispered lies into the ears of priests, and spread rumors among the nobles. "The slave seeks the crown," they said. "He plans to seize the throne when Pharaoh dies." The word spread like a desert fire carried by the wind. Even Princess Nephra began to grow distant. The doubts Rekhmire had planted now took root. She still cared for Ammonius, but fear clouded her heart. Could the man she admired truly be plotting for the throne? Ammonius felt the chill of those changing eyes around him. In meetings, nobles who once bowed now looked at him with cold suspicion. When he passed through the halls, servants whispered behind their hands. Only Pharaoh remained the same, kind, trusting, and unaware of the poison creeping through his court. Then one night, the unthinkable happened. Pharaoh Seti fell gravely ill. His physicians could not explain it. He lay on his bed, pale and feverish, breathing shallowly. The palace went into mourning. Rekhmire saw his chance. He entered the royal chamber, feigning loyalty, and bowed beside the dying pharaoh. "My lord," he said softly, "the gods are calling you home. But Egypt trembles. You must name your successor before it is too late." Seti's fading eyes opened slightly. "Bring Ammonius," he whispered. Rekhmire's jaw tightened. "Yes, my pharaoh," he said, bowing low. But instead of summoning Ammonius, Rekhmire ordered the guards to seize him. By command of the council, he declared to the startled soldiers, "Ammonius, the steward of Egypt, is accused of treason, of plotting to take the throne through poison and deceit." Ammonius was taken from his chamber in the middle of the night. He did not resist. He only asked, "Who commands this?" "The council," the captain replied uneasily. "And Vizier Rekhmire." As Ammonius was dragged through the streets toward the prison, the people cried out. Some threw stones, others shouted his name in protest. "He saved us. He saved the Nile." But the soldiers obeyed the vizier's word. In the dungeons beneath the palace, Ammonius was chained once more, the same way he had been many years ago when he first came to Thebes as a slave. The cold walls echoed with the drip of water and the murmurs of other prisoners. Days passed. No message came. No one visited him. Until one night, the sound of light footsteps entered his cell. When the door creaked open, he looked up to see Princess Nephra, her face hidden beneath a veil. "Ammonius," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They say you poisoned my father. Tell me it is not true." He rose slowly, the chains rattling around his wrists. "You have known me all these years," he said softly. "Do you truly need me to tell you that?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I do not know what to believe. The vizier, he has shown the priests evidence, scrolls, even witnesses." Ammonius' face darkened. "Then he has forged them well." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Nephra reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "If what you say is true, I will find proof. I will save you." She turned and fled before the guards could discover her visit. Meanwhile, Rekhmire stood in the royal court, weaving his lies. He presented false scrolls, forged with Ammonius' seal, claiming the steward had ordered the preparation of sacred oils, meant to harm Pharaoh. He bribed a servant to swear that Ammonius had mixed the pharaoh's last drink. The priests murmured in horror, and the council condemned Ammonius to death. But before the sentence could be carried out, the sound of running feet echoed through the hall. Princess Nephra burst in, holding a small clay vial in her hand. "This," she cried, "was found in the vizier's chamber. It contains the same poison that sickened my father. Test it, and you will know who the true traitor is." The court fell silent. All eyes turned to Rekhmire. The old vizier's face twisted in fury. "Lies. The princess has been deceived by that slave." Pharaoh Seti, weak but conscious, was brought forth on a stretcher. His voice trembled, yet carried the weight of command. "Enough," he said. "Bring the priests of medicine. Let them test the vial." Hours passed as the priests compared the poison to what had been found in Pharaoh's cup. When they returned, their faces were grim. "It is the same," one said. "The hand that poisoned the pharaoh is Rekhmire's, not Ammonius." The court gasped. Rekhmire tried to flee, but the guards seized him. Pharaoh, with the last of his strength, raised his hand. "You sought to destroy the man who saved Egypt. May your name be erased from every stone." Rekhmire was dragged away screaming. Justice had been done, but the cost was heavy. Pharaoh Seti died that very night, whispering Ammonius' name. Before his final breath, he said to Nephra, "He will bring Egypt peace. Let him guide you when I am gone." The kingdom mourned for 40 days. When it ended, the priests and nobles gathered to choose a new ruler. The people, rich and poor alike, filled the streets, chanting one name, Ammonius. From the chains of slavery to the edge of death, he had risen beyond every shadow cast upon him. Yet as the crown neared, Ammonius knew this truth deeply. Power was not a prize to be claimed, but a burden to be carried for all. And soon, the burden of Egypt itself would rest upon his shoulders. The morning fires along the Nile burned for 40 nights, their smoke rising to the heavens as if carrying Pharaoh Seti's spirit to the gods. Thebes was silent, cloaked in grief and expectation. Egypt awaited its next ruler. The council gathered beneath the grand columns of the temple of Ammonius Ra. Priests in white linen chanted hymns, while nobles whispered among themselves. Some still doubted. Others had already chosen their hearts. And in the center of that vast hall stood Ammonius, no longer bound, no longer in chains, but dressed in plain linen, humble before the gods and his people. Princess Nephra stepped forward, holding the royal seal of her father. Her voice was clear, steady, though her eyes glistened with tears. My father, Pharaoh Seti, spoke his final wish before the gods. He named Ammonius, servant of Egypt and guardian of the people, as the one most worthy to lead after him. Gasps rippled through the court. The priests murmured prayers. One noble cried out, "A slave cannot wear the crown of Egypt." But the high priest of Ammonius Ra raised his staff. The gods do not look upon the chains of men, but upon the purity of their hearts. And this man, he declared, has saved Egypt when all others failed. With that, silence fell. Ammonius stepped forward, his eyes lowered. If it is the will of Egypt, then I will serve as Pharaoh, not as a god, but as a man who remembers what it is to bow. He knelt as the priest placed upon his head the twin crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, the white crown of the south and the red crown of the north, symbols of unity. The people outside the temple roared with joy, chanting his name as drums thundered across the city. Thus, the slave became Pharaoh Amenhotep I, the servant king. His first act as ruler was not to expand Egypt's armies or build monuments, but to free those who had suffered as he once had. He declared that all slaves who served within the royal palace and its temples would be granted freedom after 7 years of service. He ordered schools to be built where children of all classes could learn to read, as Menfer once taught him. Knowledge, he said to the council, should not belong to a few. It is the Nile of the mind, meant to flow through every heart. The people rejoiced. Farmers, builders, and traders praised his wisdom. For the first time in generations, Egypt thrived not through conquest, but through fairness. Crops flourished, trade routes opened, and peace spread across the land like morning light. But not all were at peace. Some nobles still resented a former slave sitting upon the throne. They met in secret chambers, whispering that Pharaoh Amenhotep had insulted the gods by lowering the walls between master and servant. Their pride could not accept that the man they once ordered around now commanded the realm. Amenhotep knew this. He could feel the sting of their cold smiles and see the shadows behind their bows. Yet he ruled with patience. He had learned long ago that power built on fear was weaker than power born from loyalty. Each night, he stood upon his balcony overlooking the Nile, remembering his journey, the sand under his feet, the chain around his wrists, and Menfer's voice in his ear. Power without mercy turns men into monsters. He swore never to become what he had once feared. Princess Nephra, now queen, stood beside him often. The doubts that had once clouded her heart were gone. She had seen his innocence proven, his kindness endure even through betrayal. Their love, once forbidden, had become a symbol of unity, a bridge between classes, between power and compassion. One evening, as they watched the stars, she said softly, "You have done what no pharaoh before you dared, given the people hope." Amenhotep smiled faintly. "Hope," he said, "is the truest monument a ruler can build." But fate, as always, tested those who rose too high. A terrible famine struck in the eastern provinces. The rains failed again, and the Nile's waters receded. The people prayed to the gods, fearing this was punishment. Some priests whispered that the gods were angered because a man of slave blood now sat upon the throne. Amenhotep did not respond with anger. Instead, he traveled to the suffering lands himself. He refused royal carriages, walking among the people, eating the same bread they did. He listened to their pain and worked beside the builders who repaired the canals. His presence inspired hope once more. When the rains finally returned, the people said, "The gods heard our pharaoh's heart." He returned to Thebes weary, yet stronger in spirit. The court expected him to celebrate his success with feasts, but instead, he went alone to the temple where Menfer had once taught him. There, he offered gold and grain in honor of his old teacher, now long gone. "Without your wisdom," Amenhotep whispered, kneeling before the altar, "I would still be a slave in the darkness. May the gods grant you peace among the stars." As the years passed, Egypt entered an age of prosperity. The slave who had once bowed before kings now stood as the greatest among them, not through conquest, but through compassion. In the murals painted on the temple walls, Pharaoh Amenhotep was depicted not with a whip or sword, but holding an open hand, a symbol of mercy and balance. Beneath his image were inscribed the words he often spoke to his people. "No man is born a slave before the gods. Only ignorance makes one bow." Yet, even as glory surrounded him, Amenhotep remained humble. He often walked through the streets in disguise, speaking to farmers and merchants as if he were one of them. When asked why, he simply said, "A ruler must never forget the sound of the people's voice, for that is where his power truly lives." In the twilight of his reign, as age began to slow him, Amenhotep stood once more upon his balcony, overlooking the river that had carried his destiny. The stars above shimmered like the dreams of his youth. He whispered, "From chains to crown, from dust to dawn, the Nile remembers all." May Egypt never forget that greatness can rise from anywhere. The wind carried his words across the river, through the city, into the hearts of his people, where they lived for generations as legend. A slave had become pharaoh. A man had become more than his birth. And in doing so, he had taught Egypt that the truest crown is not made of gold, but of compassion, courage, and wisdom. The empire rising from the rock, the story of a forgotten family. The wind howled across the barren valley, carrying dust and the faint scent of forgotten time. Once, this land had been alive, full of song, gold, and the laughter of a proud people. Now only silence ruled. The rocks stood like gravestones of an empire that had vanished into the folds of history. At the edge of these ruins stood a young man named Arin Darel, a historian by heart and wanderer by circumstance. He had spent years following fragments of legends, whispers of an empire that had once risen here, an empire that had turned to dust without leaving a single name in the records. The locals called the place Rokhara, meaning the rock that breathes. They said that beneath the ground lay something alive, the remnants of a kingdom built into the very stone, its heart still beating, waiting to be found. Arin had come not for treasure, but for truth. He walked among cracked pillars and sand-buried walls, his torch flickering against carvings too faint to read. The stones seemed to speak in a language lost to time. Arin brushed off the sand and found the faint outline of a crest, a rising sun above a jagged mountain. Beneath it were the words in an ancient tongue, "From the rock we rise, and to the rock we return." Arin felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen that phrase before, in a book his late father once guarded fiercely. His father, Arin Darel, had been a respected archaeologist who died mysteriously after claiming to have found evidence of a hidden lineage, a royal family erased from history. Arin never believed the rumors that his father went mad before his death. He knew there was truth buried somewhere deep, and he was determined to uncover it. As he knelt beside the old stone crest, his fingers traced a small indentation in the rock, a circle no larger than a coin. It looked like a lock. He pulled a small metallic disc from his pocket, the only thing left from his father's belongings, engraved with the same rising sun emblem. When he pressed it into the groove, the earth trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. A deep grinding echoed through the valley, as if the mountain itself had awoken from sleep. Slowly, a part of the rock wall shifted, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling into the ground. Arin's heart pounded. He raised his torch and stepped forward. The air was thick, ancient, filled with the scent of age and mystery. The steps led to a chamber deep beneath the valley floor. Its walls were carved with scenes of kings, battles, and builders shaping an empire out of bare stone. At the center stood a massive throne, not of gold, but carved from one solid piece of rock. Upon it lay a skeleton wrapped in a shroud of faded cloth. Around the bones were seals, rings, and inscriptions that glowed faintly under the torchlight. Arin stepped closer and whispered, "Who are you?" The torchlight flickered as if in answer. He read the inscription on the throne's base, words in the same forgotten script his father once obsessed over. He could only decipher fragments, but one part stood clear. King Darien of the First Rock, father of the empire. Arin froze. The surname carved beneath the king's name, though worn by time, was unmistakable. Darel. He stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. The Darel family, his family. His father's claim was true. They were descendants of the lost rulers of Rokhara, the bloodline that built an empire from stone itself, and then vanished. 1,000 questions filled his mind. Why had history erased them? What curse or betrayal had buried their name? As he pondered, a faint hum filled the chamber. The carvings began to shimmer faintly. One by one, the walls lit up with light, ancient crystals embedded in the stone awakening after centuries of silence. Arin turned around, startled. The skeleton's hand, once still, now pointed toward a dark tunnel beyond the throne. The ground beneath him trembled again, and from somewhere deep in the darkness, a voice, faint but clear, spoke in a language he somehow understood. "Blood of the rock, your time has come. The empire must rise again." Arin's torch flickered, and he felt the weight of destiny press upon his chest. The forgotten family's story was not over. It was just beginning. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the torch, and stepped toward the darkness that awaited. The tunnel was narrow and cold, the air heavy with dust and the faint hum of unseen energy. Arin's torchlight danced on the ancient walls as he descended deeper into the earth. Strange markings ran along the stone, spirals, suns, and jagged mountains intertwined with symbols of fire and crowns. It felt less like a tomb and more like a warning carved in stone. Each step echoed through the passage like a heartbeat. He could feel something pulling him forward, not fear, but a deep, instinctive connection. The voice he had heard moments before still lingered in his mind, whispering in fragments he couldn't fully understand. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast underground hall. Its ceiling soared high above him, supported by towering stone pillars shaped like human figures, kings and queens of old, their faces worn but proud. In the center of the hall was a circular platform of smooth black rock, and above it floated a dim sphere of light, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Arin stepped closer. The air around the sphere shimmered, and for a brief moment, the hall seemed to come alive. The sound of hammers, chanting workers, and the distant music of an ancient empire echoed faintly. He whispered, "Is this the heart of Rokhara?" A gust of warm wind swirled around him, and the sphere brightened. A figure appeared within the light, tall, regal, wrapped in robes that flickered like firelight. His eyes were sharp and sorrowful, and his voice carried the weight of ages. "You have come at last," the figure said. "The blood of Darien flows once more in the land of the stone." Arin's knees trembled. "Who are you?" "I am the memory of your ancestor," the figure replied. "I am King Darien I, the builder of this empire, and the last to fall when the betrayal came." The air grew colder. Arin's mind raced. Betrayal? What happened to our family? Why did the world forget us? King Darien's image flickered. "We built Rokhara from the bare rock, shaping an empire with our hands and hearts. Our people thrived, our stones sang. But envy grew in the shadows. Those who once called themselves allies turned against us. They coveted our secret, the source of the rock, the power that binds stone and life together. The source? Arin asked, stepping closer. The king's expression darkened. It lies beneath us still, the power that gave Rokhara strength. But when the betrayal came, when fire and steel fell upon our walls, we sealed it away. We vowed it would not fall into unworthy hands. Our names were erased, our city buried, and our blood scattered to the wind. Arin swallowed hard. Then why awaken me? I'm no king, no warrior. I'm just a man chasing my father's dreams. The spirit's gaze softened. You are more than you know. Your father heard the call but could not answer it. His time ended too soon. Now, it is you who must decide whether to let the memory of Rokhara fade forever or to raise it from the rock once more. The sphere pulsed brighter. Images flickered within. Vast cities carved into cliffs, towers gleaming with sunlight, rivers flowing through stone gates. And then fire. Armies marching. Betrayal. Arin's heart ached. He saw his ancestors' kingdom crumble beneath greed and fear. Where do I begin? He whispered. The spirit extended a hand. Seek the 3 pillars, the stones of blood, heart, and crown. They hold the memory of the empire. Unite them, and Rokhara will awaken. But beware, others have felt the stir of the rock. They will come for you. Before Arin could speak, the light began to fade. The hall grew dark again. Wait, he shouted. Where do I find the stones? The spirit's final words echoed faintly. Follow the path of the scarred mountain. There you will find the first, the stone of blood. And you will find those who wish to claim it before you. The light vanished. Silence fell. Arin stood alone in the dark, his pulse racing. The fate of an empire, his family's empire, rested on him. He turned back toward the tunnel, ready to climb to the surface and begin his search. But as he emerged into the pale dawn, he realized he wasn't alone. At the edge of the ruins, half shrouded in mist, stood a group of strangers dressed in black, their faces hidden. One of them stepped forward, holding a strange device that hummed faintly, the same sound that had filled the chamber moments before. Arin Darel, the man said, his voice calm and cold. We've been expecting you. The others raised their torches, and the symbol on their clothing glowed, a serpent wrapped around a shattered sun. Arin froze. That was the emblem his father had warned him about, the Order of the Shattered Sun, the very group said to have destroyed Rokhara. And now, they stood between him and his family's destiny. The morning sun broke weakly over the ruins of Rokhara, turning the valley's stones a dull gold. Arin stood still, heart pounding, as the strangers closed in. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar running across his cheek, stopped just a few steps away. His gray eyes were cold, sharp as blades. You have something that doesn't belong to you, the man said. His tone was calm, but there was iron beneath it. Arin's hand instinctively went to his pocket, the metallic disc, the crest of the rising sun. Who are you? He asked. The man smirked. We are what remains of those who ended your family's empire. The world has no room for kings of stone anymore. Arin's throat went dry. You're with the Order of the Shattered Sun. The man's smile faded. Then you already know enough to die for it. Without warning, one of the cloaked figures lunged forward. Arin stumbled back, dodging barely in time. He ran, his boots kicking up dust as shouts erupted behind him. Arrows whistled past his ears, clanging against the broken walls. He darted between pillars and over fallen stones, searching for a way out. The ruins were a maze of shadows and echoes. He remembered his father's lessons, the old maps, the sketches of hidden paths under the sand. There had to be an escape route somewhere. As he sprinted across a crumbling platform, the ground gave way. Arin fell hard, tumbling down into a shallow pit. Pain shot through his shoulder, but when he looked up, the light above was already fading as the pursuers reached the edge. Seal the exits, the scarred man ordered. He won't get far. Arin crawled through a narrow tunnel that split from the pit, clutching his torch. The tunnel sloped upward, leading him out to a narrow ravine beyond the ruins. The morning air was sharp and dry. In the distance, jagged cliffs rose like teeth against the horizon, one of them marked with a deep, scar-like cut across its face. The Scarred Mountain. King Darien's voice echoed in Arin's memory. Follow the path of the Scarred Mountain. There you will find the Stone of Blood. Arin tightened his pack and began the long trek toward it. The journey took 2 days. The valley stretched endlessly, its silence broken only by the wind. At night, Arin slept beneath the stars, dreaming of a city carved in stone and voices calling his name. When he woke, he could still hear them faintly, the whispers of his ancestors guiding him onward. By the 3rd day, he reached the foot of the Scarred Mountain. A deep fissure split its face, and within that wound of stone lay a narrow cave mouth. He lit his torch and entered. The air was cool, metallic, and heavy with age. Strange red crystals jutted from the walls, glowing faintly like veins of fire beneath the rock. The deeper he went, the stronger the hum became, the same sound he had heard in the hall of King Darien. Finally, he reached a chamber bathed in red light. In the center stood an altar carved from black stone, and upon it rested a crystal the size of a heart, glowing softly with pulsing crimson light. Arin approached slowly. The glow seemed to react to his presence, brightening with every step. He felt warmth spread through his hand as he reached out. "This must be it," he whispered. "The Stone of Blood." When his fingers touched the surface, the chamber erupted in light. Visions flashed before his eyes. Warriors kneeling before a crowned king, rivers of molten stone, and the forging of the first pillars of Rokhara. He saw his ancestor King Darien, hands stained with earth and blood, raising the stone as the empire was born. Then the vision shifted, betrayal, flames, and shadows bearing the mark of the serpent and shattered sun. The same mark the order carried. Arin gasped and staggered back. His palm burned with a faint red mark, the symbol of the rising sun, glowing softly on his skin. But before he could breathe, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Well done, Darel," said the scarred man, stepping from the shadows of the cave, his soldiers behind him. "You've found it for us." Arin's heart sank. "How did you?" "We've been following you since you left the valley," the man said, his tone almost amused. "Your bloodline may be cursed, but it still has its uses. Now, hand over the stone." Arin's mind raced. If the Order claimed the Stone of Blood, they would control the very essence of the Empire's power. He couldn't let that happen. He clenched his fist. "This stone belongs to Rokhara, not to you." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll die with it." The soldiers advanced, blades drawn. Arin grabbed the crystal and ran deeper into the cave. Light flared behind him as energy bolts struck the walls, sending shards of rock flying. The tunnel split into 2 paths, one leading upward, one downward into darkness. Without hesitation, he took the downward path. The tunnel ended abruptly at a sheer drop. Far below, faint red light glowed like embers. He could hear the soldiers closing in. There was no time. He looked at the crystal in his hand. It pulsed once, as if alive. Then, without warning, it formed a bridge of light across the chasm. Arin hesitated only a moment before running across. The moment his feet touched the other side, the bridge vanished in a flash of red. The Order soldiers shouted in frustration from the far ledge. Arin turned and climbed through a narrow passage that led upward until finally, he emerged into open air again. The scarred mountain stood silent behind him, but in his hand, the stone of blood shimmered like a living heart. He had one piece of the Empire's legacy, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Order would not stop until they had all 3. As he stared at the horizon, the wind carried faint whispers again, the voice of his ancestor, steady and proud. "You have awakened the blood. Now, seek the heart." Arin looked toward the distant cliffs where the sun was setting, painting the world in crimson. He whispered back, "I will." And with that, he began his journey toward the next pillar, unaware that in the shadows beyond the dunes, another figure was watching him, cloaked and silent, waiting for the moment to reveal herself. The sun dipped low behind the scarred mountain, leaving long shadows crawling across the sand. Arin trudged through the vast emptiness, the red glow of the stone of blood faintly pulsing in his pack. Each beat of its light felt like a heartbeat, not his own, but that of something ancient, something waking beneath the earth. He had been walking for hours since leaving the mountain behind, his mind replaying the encounter with the Order of the Shattered Sun. They had nearly caught him. Their leader, the scarred man with eyes of ice, had called his bloodline cursed. Arin couldn't shake that word from his thoughts. If the Empire had been betrayed and his family erased, what curse had they left behind? The desert was silent except for the wind. But then, faintly, he heard footsteps behind him.
Slow.
Careful. Arin stopped, turned, and saw her, the cloaked figure who had been watching him at the mountain's edge. She stood a short distance away, her face hidden beneath a hood, her posture calm, not threatening. "Who are you?" Arin called out. His hand instinctively reached for the small knife at his belt. The woman lifted her hands, showing she was unarmed. "I mean no harm," she said. Her voice was soft but carried strength, echoing faintly in the open air. "If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have waited this long." "That's not comforting," Arin muttered. The woman stepped closer, pulling back her hood. Her hair was dark as midnight, her eyes sharp amber, reflecting the dying sun. There was something ancient about her, not in age, but in the way she carried herself, like a person who belonged to another time. "My name is Lyra," she said. "And you're walking a path you don't understand." "I know enough," Arin replied. "You're from the Order, aren't you?" Lyra shook her head.
No.
"I fight them. Or I did, before they destroyed everything I had." Her gaze shifted to the pack on his shoulder. "You found it, the Stone of Blood." Arin hesitated. "How do you know about that?" "Because I've been searching for it, too," she said quietly. "My family kept the ancient songs of Rokhara, the stories the world tried to erase. The stones of blood, heart, and crown were not just symbols. They were keys, parts of the source your ancestors forged to keep the Empire alive. When the Order rose, they broke the stones apart to weaken your bloodline." Arin's pulse quickened. "Then you know where the next one is, the Stone of Heart." Lyra nodded slowly. "I know where it lies. But it's not a place you can reach alone." He studied her carefully. "Why help me?" "Because if the Order gets the stones before you do," she said, her voice hardening, "they'll resurrect Rokhara not as a kingdom of peace, but as a weapon." The desert wind howled between them. Arin finally nodded. "Then lead the way." For 3 days they traveled together, crossing barren plains and forgotten ruins half swallowed by the sand. Lyra moved like someone who knew the land's secrets, finding hidden wells, reading the stars, and guiding them through paths unseen by others. At night, they built small fires and spoke little. But Arin noticed the way Lyra sometimes hummed soft melodies in a language he didn't understand. They were hauntingly beautiful, like the songs of the wind through stone. One night, as they rested near the remnants of an old stone tower, Arin asked, "You said your family kept the songs. Who were they?" Lyra's eyes flickered with pain. "The keepers of the veins," she said. "When Rokhara fell, a few families were chosen to guard its memory. Mine was one of them. We were hunted by the Order for generations. I'm the last of my line." "The last," Arin repeated quietly. He understood that loneliness, the weight of being the final thread of something ancient and forgotten. She looked at him with faint sorrow. "And you are the last of yours, Arin Darel. You carry not just your father's name, but the burden of an empire." Arin gazed into the fire. "I never asked for any of this." Lyra's voice softened. "No one ever does." By the 5th day, they reached a hidden canyon, its entrance concealed by thick stone ridges. Carvings marked the walls, flowing lines and spirals that glowed faintly when the light touched them. Lyra stopped and whispered, "This is it, the Valley of Hearts. The stone lies within." They entered carefully. The air was cooler here, and faint streams of water trickled through cracks in the rock. Deeper inside, the canyon opened into a chamber unlike any Arin had seen before. Dozens of statues stood in silent rows, each carved from white stone, men and women holding their hands over their chests, faces serene. In the center, suspended above a shallow pool of clear water, floated a crystal shaped like a heart, glowing faintly blue. The Stone of Heart. Arin stepped forward. The air trembled around him. Careful, Lyra warned. The stone tests those who seek it. It responds not to blood, but to truth. He looked at her uncertain. Truth. She nodded. If you approach it with deceit in your heart, it will turn against you. Arin took a deep breath. He stepped into the pool, the cool water swirling around his boots. The glow from the crystal brightened with each step. When he reached out, visions rushed through him, not of kings and battles this time, but of feelings. He saw his father, proud and weary, digging through dust in search of the forgotten city. He saw himself as a child, staring at maps, dreaming of understanding his family's past. He felt guilt for doubting his father, sorrow for never saying goodbye, and fear that he was not strong enough to carry the legacy. Then the voice came, soft, calm, and kind. The heart of the empire is not stone or power, but love. To rule is to feel. To rebuild is to remember why. Tears blurred Arin's vision. The crystal drifted into his hands, glowing warmly. The light spread across his arms, forming faint blue patterns that intertwined with the red marks from the stone of blood. Lyra watched silently. "You've been chosen," she whispered. "The stones recognize you." Arin looked at the glowing crystal in awe. Two stones united. Before he could finish, a sudden explosion shook the canyon. Dust rained from the ceiling. Voices echoed from above, shouts, footsteps, and the crackle of energy weapons. Lyra's face went pale. "They've found us." The order of the shattered sun had returned. Arin clutched the Stone of Heart, the air pulsing with light around him. Lyra drew a curved blade from her belt, her stance firm. "Go," she shouted. "Get the stone to safety." "I'm not leaving you," Arin yelled back. The canyon walls trembled again as soldiers began descending on ropes, their symbols glowing in the dark. The leader's voice boomed across the chamber, cold, familiar. "Nowhere left to run, Darel." The scarred man sneered. "You should have stayed buried with your empire." Arin's grip tightened around the stones. The ground beneath him began to glow faintly, the marks on his skin pulsing in rhythm. The Empire's blood was waking again. The air crackled with energy as the order of the shattered sun descended into the canyon, their torches and plasma weapons casting jagged shadows across the statues. Dust filled the air, and the faint glow of the Stone of Heart in Arin's hand pulsed like a warning. Lyra drew her curved blade and stepped protectively in front of him. "Stay behind me," she said, eyes locked on the intruders above. Arin could hear the scarred man's voice echoing down the canyon walls. "End this, Darel. You've already lost. Give us the stones, and perhaps I'll let you keep your life." Arin's pulse raced. "He'll kill us either way." Lyra smiled grimly. "Then we'll give him a fight worth remembering." The first wave of the Order's soldiers hit the ground hard, raising clouds of sand. Lyra moved like lightning, silent, precise. Her blade cut through the first attacker before he could fire, her movements guided by instinct and grace. Arin ducked behind a fallen statue, clutching both stones. The red glow of blood and the blue light of heart began to merge, spiraling in faint tendrils of color. The ground trembled beneath him. He could feel something stirring, the same hum that filled the ancient chambers beneath Rokhara, but stronger now. A soldier rushed toward him. Arin raised his hand in reflex, and light burst from his palm. The man was thrown backward, slammed against the canyon wall by an invisible force. Arin stared at his hand, shaking. What did I just do?" Lyra glanced back briefly, her expression mixed with awe and urgency. "The stones are answering you. They recognize their bloodline. You're awakening the power of Rokhara itself." Arin could feel the heat of the stones burning in his grip. The red glow of blood pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and the blue light of heart flowed around it like living water. Together, They formed a pattern on his arms, veins of light running under his skin. More soldiers dropped into the canyon. Lyra fought fiercely, but they were too many. One blast of plasma struck her shoulder, and she stumbled. Arin rushed forward, catching her before she fell.
Go, she gasped.
Take the stones. If they capture you, everything ends. I'm not leaving you again, Arin said, his voice breaking. Not this time. He turned to face the advancing soldiers. The scarred man dropped down last, his cloak billowing, his cold eyes fixed on Arin. You're playing with forces that destroyed your own ancestors, the man said. Do you even know why your empire fell? It wasn't betrayal alone. It was arrogance. Arin glared at him. You're lying. The man's lips curved into a faint smile. Am I? Rokhara tried to conquer the world beneath them. They sought to become gods. The Order was born to stop them. And now, you'll finish what they started. The destruction of everything. His words twisted in Arin's mind. Was that true? Had his ancestors caused their own downfall? Lyra, clutching her wounded arm, shook her head weakly. Don't listen to him. The Order rewrote history. They destroyed the truth. The scarred man drew a long, black blade, its edge shimmering with strange light. Enough talk, he said coldly. Give me the stones. Arin stepped forward. You'll never have them. The scarred man lunged. Their blades clashed, Arin using Lyra's spare dagger, barely managing to block the blows. Sparks flew as metal met metal. Arin was no warrior, but the stones pulsed with energy, guiding his movements. When the scarred man swung again, Arin raised his palm. Light erupted, sending a wave of force that hurled the man backward into a stone statue, shattering it. The soldiers hesitated, stunned. Lyra used the moment to pull a small device from her belt, a round sphere of glass and iron. Close your eyes, she shouted. Arin ducked. The device exploded in a flash of blinding white. The soldiers cried out as smoke filled the canyon. Lyra grabbed Arin's hand. Come on! They ran through the smoke, up a hidden path carved into the canyon wall. Behind them, shouts and gunfire echoed, but they didn't stop. The passage twisted upward, leading to a narrow tunnel that opened onto the desert above. They stumbled out, gasping for air as the night wind swept over them. The stars shimmered cold and clear. Lyra collapsed to her knees, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Arin knelt beside her, panic in his eyes. We need to stop the bleeding. She shook her head weakly. Later. We can't stop now. They'll track us. Arin pulled a cloth from his bag, tearing it and binding her wound tightly. The stones glowed faintly beside them, casting soft light over her pale face. Lyra looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. You did it. The stones of blood and heart are united again. The last one remains, the stone of crown. It lies where Rokhara once stood, beneath the City of Dust. The City of Dust. Arin frowned. I thought it was just a legend. Lyra's lips curved faintly. Most legends are truths buried too deep for the world to see. Arin looked at the horizon. In the distance, faint storm clouds gathered, strange and glowing. The air itself felt charged, alive. He turned to her. We'll go together. We'll finish what my father started. Lyra met his gaze, a flicker of trust passing between them. Then prepare yourself, Arin Darel. The path to the crown is the path to truth, and truth has a price. As they set out again under the night sky, the ground beneath them trembled faintly, as though something vast and ancient was shifting below. And deep within the canyon they'd escaped, the scarred man rose slowly from the dust, eyes burning with fury. He looked toward the horizon where Arin had vanished and whispered, Let him run. The curse will find him soon enough. Then he turned toward the shattered statues of the old kings and smiled coldly. The blood of Rokhara always burns itself out. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a sea of shifting sand under a bruised sky. For days, Arin and Lyra walked in silence, the wind biting at their faces and the sun burning down like a relentless eye. The stones of blood and heart glowed faintly within Arin's pack, pulsing together like twin hearts beating in unison. Each night they made camp beneath the stars, sleeping in turns, never truly at peace. Somewhere behind them, the Order of the Shattered Sun was still hunting, their leader, the scarred man, alive and burning with vengeance. But ahead lay something far older and far more dangerous. Lyra's maps were drawn in fragments, scraps of ancient scrolls and forgotten verses from her family's songs. All of them spoke of one place, the City of Dust, the once great capital of Rokhara that had vanished beneath the sand after the Empire's fall. As they approached the dunes that legend called the Sleeping Plains, the ground began to change. The sand here shimmered faintly, almost metallic, and Arin could feel a low vibration beneath his boots, as if something vast and hidden breathed under the desert. "This is the place," Lyra said quietly, her amber eyes fixed on the horizon. "The city lies below." Arin stared at the endless dunes. "Below? There's nothing here." Lyra knelt and brushed her fingers through the sand. Beneath the top layer of dust, something solid and black glimmered faintly. The city was buried by its own creators. They sealed it to keep the last stone safe, the Stone of Crown. To open it, she looked up at him. "You'll need both of the stones you carry." Arin hesitated. "You mean use them together?" "Yes," she said. "But it will come at a cost." He didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. Every step closer to the stone's power seemed to drain something from him. The marks on his skin burned more brightly each day, and sometimes, when he touched the stones, he could hear whispers, faint voices calling his name in languages long forgotten. Still, he pressed on. He had come too far to turn back now. They reached the center of the plains by dusk. The air felt thick, heavy with static. Lyra drew a circle in the sand with her blade, then nodded to Arin. "Place the stones here. Blood on the left, heart on the right." Arin obeyed. As soon as he set them down, light burst from the ground, forming glowing veins across the sand. The desert began to tremble. Lyra stepped back, shielding her eyes. "It's working." The dunes split apart, sand cascading into a massive sinkhole that yawned beneath their feet. Slowly, rising from the depths, came the black spires and stone towers of an ancient city, half buried, half broken, but still magnificent. The City of Dust had awoken. Arin and Lyra stood at the edge of a great stone bridge that had once been a city gate. Beneath them, the streets stretched endlessly, covered in ash and time. Statues of kings lined the avenues, their faces eroded but still proud. Arin's breath caught. This was Rokhara. Lyra's eyes softened.
Yes.
The empire that rose from the rock and was swallowed by it. They walked slowly into the city. Every step echoed against the hollow streets. Strange lights flickered within the towers, though no life moved within them. "This place feels alive," Arin whispered. Lyra nodded. "It remembers." At the heart of the city stood a massive palace, carved entirely from black stone. Its doors were shut, sealed with strange markings. Above them was the crest of the rising sun over the mountain, the symbol of the Darel line. Arin stepped closer. His hand trembled as he traced the symbol. "This was my family's home." He placed the two stones into the circular engravings on the door. They fit perfectly, their light merging into a spiral of red and blue. The ground shook as the doors slowly opened, releasing a rush of stale, cold air. Inside, the palace was dark, yet beautiful beyond words. Pillars of carved obsidian rose toward a domed ceiling where faint stars glowed like the night sky. At the center stood a dais, surrounded by statues of the old kings. Upon it rested a pedestal holding a third crystal, pure white, shaped like a crown. The Stone of Crown. Arin and Lyra approached cautiously. "It looks different," Arin said. "Alive." Lyra nodded. "Because it is." The Stone of Crown holds the spirit of Rokhara itself, the memory, the will, and the curse. The curse? Arin frowned. Lyra turned to him. "Every empire built from stone and blood must pay a price. The founders bound their souls to the land to keep it eternal. But when betrayal came, that same bond turned against them. Rokhara did not fall from outside. It turned to dust from within. Arin's voice was low. So the curse is in the stones. In the stones, she said, and in you. Before he could respond, a cold voice echoed through the hall. Very well said, Keeper. They both spun around. The scarred man stood at the entrance, flanked by a dozen soldiers of the order. His blade gleamed in the dim light. I must thank you, he said, smiling thinly. You've done what no one else could, awakened the city and gathered the stones. Arin stepped in front of Lyra. You'll never touch them. The man laughed softly. Oh, I don't need to. You'll hand them over willingly. The curse has already begun its work, hasn't it? Arin felt a sudden pain in his chest, sharp and deep. The markings on his skin glowed brighter, spreading up his neck. He gasped, falling to one knee. Lyra rushed to him, shouting, Arin, fight it. The scarred man's smile widened. You see? The blood of Rokhara is both key and poison. The Empire cannot rise without destroying its last heir. Lyra drew her blade, fury burning in her eyes. Then I'll end your line before you end his. The soldiers moved first. The hall erupted into chaos, steel against light, shadows against flame. Lyra fought like a storm, cutting through the first attackers, but she was outnumbered. Arin, trembling, reached for the stones. The white crystal of the crown shimmered brighter, and the others in his hands began to hum in resonance. He could hear his ancestors' voices again, thousands of them, crying out in a single chorus. From the rock we rise, from the heart we endure, from the crown we reign. The stones merged into one blinding sphere of light. Arin, Lyra shouted, shielding her eyes. The scarred man lunged at him, but it was too late. The light exploded, throwing everyone back. The palace walls cracked. The floor split open, revealing glowing rivers of molten stone beneath. When the light faded, Arin stood in the center of the dais, eyes glowing, the merged stones floating above his hands like a halo. His voice was deeper, echoing with ancient power. I am the blood of Rokhara, he said, his tone no longer his own. The Empire's curse ends today. The scarred man staggered up, eyes wide in shock. You fool. You'll destroy yourself. Arin looked down at him calmly. Then I'll take the curse with me. The palace began to crumble, the city shaking as though waking from centuries of sleep. Lyra ran to Arin, shouting above the roar. There's another way. Don't let it consume you. But Arin only smiled faintly. Tell my story, Lyra. Tell them we rose again. A wave of white light surged through the city, racing outward like fire through dry grass. The towers cracked, the statues crumbled. But within the destruction, the city began to glow, not die. The dust lifted, swirling upward in a storm of gold. And from the heart of it all, Rokhara, the Empire of Stone, began to rise once more. The light from the stones filled the ancient city like a second sunrise. The black towers of Rokhara, once buried under sand and silence, now glowed with golden veins of molten light. The ground trembled, not in ruin, but in rebirth. Lyra shielded her eyes, her voice trembling. Arin, through the radiance, she could barely see him, standing at the center of the dais, surrounded by swirling dust and fragments of stone. His body was alight with power, the marks across his skin glowing like molten lines carved by gods themselves. The merged stones floated above his hands, spinning faster and faster until they formed a single brilliant crown of light. The scarred man crawled to his feet, fear replacing the arrogance in his face. You don't know what you're doing. You're waking the Empire's curse. Arin turned toward him, and his voice came not from one mouth, but from many, deep, echoing, filled with the weight of 1,000 kings. Rokhara is not a curse. It is memory. It is truth. He raised his hands. The air crackled as light surged through the city's veins. The statues of kings and queens began to move, stone bodies cracking, dust falling from their limbs as if time itself had reversed. Their eyes, once empty, now glowed with blue fire. Lyra fell back, awe and terror mixing in her face. "They're alive." The scarred man backed away, shaking his head. "No, no, this cannot be." From the shadows of the palace came figures, spectral and regal. The spirits of Rokhara's rulers, their forms flickering like smoke and fire. At their head stood a tall man wearing a stone crown, his face eerily familiar. King Arin Darel. Arin stared at him, speechless. You're my ancestor." The spirit smiled sadly. "And you, my blood reborn. I watched over this land as it turned to dust, waiting for the day our line would awaken. You have done what I could not. You have brought Rokhara back to life." Arin's chest ached, his voice trembling. "But the curse, it's killing me." King Darien stepped forward, his gaze full of both pride and sorrow. "It was never a curse, child. It was a bond. When the empire fell to greed and betrayal, our hearts turned to stone to preserve what remained. The bond held us here, waiting for one pure of spirit to restore balance." Lyra stepped beside Arin. "But if the bond is restored, won't he be trapped as well?" The king's expression darkened.
"Yes."
"The blood of the Darel line is the vessel of the empire. If he completes the bond, his soul will join ours, and Rokhara will live through him, eternal, but never free." Arin's breath caught. The choice was clear. He could save the empire, but he would never walk among the living again. The scarred man rose to his feet, his rage returning.
"No."
"The empire belongs to the Order. It was meant to be reborn under my command." He charged forward, blade gleaming. Before he could strike, Lyra intercepted him, her sword meeting his in a clash that echoed through the hall. They fought fiercely, steel against fury. Lyra's movements were graceful but desperate. She fought not for glory, but to buy Arin time. "Arin," she shouted. "Decide." Arin looked at the stones, the crown of light still spinning above his hands. Around him, the ghosts of his ancestors stood silently, waiting for his choice. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why must I pay this price?" King Darien's voice was soft. "Because you remember what we forgot, that an empire is not its stone, but its heart." The scarred man roared and knocked Lyra to the floor. He raised his blade over her. "Then both of you die with your empire." Arin turned, eyes blazing. "No." He thrust his hand forward, and the crown of light exploded into a wave of energy that froze the scarred man mid-strike. His body turned to dust, scattering like ashes in the wind. The city fell silent again. Lyra rose, staring at Arin. "You can still stop this. You don't have to stay." He smiled faintly. "I do. If I leave, Rokhara will die again. It deserves to live, not as a kingdom of greed, but as a memory of hope." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You'll disappear." He reached out, brushing her cheek. His touch was warm, though his body was fading into light. "I won't disappear. I'll be part of the stone, the wind, the sun that rises every morning. When you walk through these halls, you'll hear me." Lyra held his hand tightly. "Arin," he looked up at the spirits of his ancestors. "I'm ready." The stones lowered themselves into his chest, merging with his heart. His body shimmered, then slowly dissolved into light. The palace shone brighter and brighter until the entire city glowed like dawn reborn. The spirits of Rokhara bowed to him, their new king, their final heir. And then, one by one, they too faded, leaving behind a city alive with golden fire, its towers whole again, its rivers flowing with molten light. When Lyra awoke, the desert was calm. The sand no longer burned. The ruins of Rokhara stood gleaming beneath the rising sun, not as ghosts, but as living stone. She walked to the throne hall, now open to the sky. The dais stood empty, save for a single stone crown resting at its center. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Lyra smiled through her tears. "You did it, Arin." As she turned to leave, the wind whispered through the city, a voice she knew well. "From the rock we rise, and to the rock we return." The sun rose gently over the reborn city of Rokhara, bathing its black stone towers in a soft gold glow. The air that once stank of dust and death now shimmered with life. Rivers that had been dry for centuries ran again, glistening like melted amber through the valley. The song of wind across stone sounded like music, low, deep, and alive. Lyra stood on the highest terrace of the palace, her hair whipping in the morning wind. Below her, the streets were alive again, not with people, but with light. Every corner of the city pulsed with a quiet heartbeat, as though the stone itself remembered joy. But Arin was gone. Only the stone crown remained, resting on the dais where he had vanished. It pulsed faintly, warm to the touch, like the echo of a living soul. Lyra had stayed for days, unwilling to leave, half expecting him to walk out from the light, smiling that same uncertain smile. But he never did. She pressed her hand against the crown and whispered, "You kept your promise, Arin. You brought them back." The air stirred softly, and for a moment, she thought she heard his voice, calm, distant, and full of warmth. "We rise when we remember who we are." Lyra smiled through tears. She knew what she had to do. That night, she gathered what she could: scrolls preserved by the city's strange power, carvings from the palace walls, and fragments of Arin's notes. The story of the Darel bloodline, the truth of Rokhara's fall, and the sacrifice that restored it all. When she left, the city seemed to breathe in farewell. The gates closed behind her with a soft rumble, as if sealing its rebirth. She turned once more to look at the towers, now radiant under the moonlight, and whispered, "Goodbye, my friend." Then she began her long journey back across the desert. Weeks passed. The desert was cruel, but Lyra walked with purpose. Word spread as she traveled, of a glowing city seen in the distance, of lights dancing in the sand where there had been only ruin. Traders, wanderers, and scholars whispered of it around campfires. The Empire of the Rock has returned. When Lyra finally reached the coastal city of Nerith, she was exhausted, sunburned, and trembling. Yet her eyes carried the fire of something greater than survival. She sought out the Council of Historians, the same institution that had once laughed at her and her family's legends. They didn't laugh this time. She placed the sealed scrolls and the sketches upon their marble table. "You erased them from your books," she said quietly. "You said the Darel line was a myth, that Rokhara never existed. Now, the truth stands in the desert, alive." Arin Darel gave everything to restore it. The elders stared in silence. Some looked fearful, others humbled. One, an old scholar with silver hair, whispered, "You've seen it? The empire that rose from the rock." Lyra nodded. "And I carry its story." Years passed. The world changed. Lyra became the keeper of Rokhara's truth, the one who rewrote history. Her words spread across nations, igniting curiosity and wonder. Scholars began expeditions to the desert, but none could enter the glowing city. The gates remained sealed, guarded by light and silence. It became a sacred place, not of conquest, but remembrance. Children grew up hearing tales of the man who spoke to stone, the last heir who gave his life to bring peace to a broken land. Arin Darel's name became legend, not as a king of power, but as a king of sacrifice. Lyra, now older and wiser, often stood on the cliffs above the sea, watching the sunset. She had written a final book, The Empire Rising from the Rock. Its last lines were carved in her heart. Empires fall when they forget their hearts, and they rise again when one's soul dares to remember. Sometimes, when the evening wind brushed past her, she heard that same whisper she once heard in the ruins, a voice made of stone, wind, and memory. "Lyra," she smiled, "still watching over me?" "Always. The rock endures. The heart endures." And as the sun sank into the sea, its reflection turned the waves to gold, like the stones of Rokhara shining once more beneath the desert sky. Epilogue: The Stone Song. Centuries later, travelers in the desert still speak of a city that glows at dawn. Some say the stones hum when the wind passes through them, whispering words too old to understand. Others say they see a figure upon the palace terrace, a man made of light, watching the horizon as if waiting for something. No one dares to enter. But those who listen closely at night, when the desert is still, swear they can hear a voice carried on the wind, calm, eternal, and proud. From the rock we rise, and to the rock we return.